I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It was Tuesday, which meant I always stopped by the corner cafe after class, pretending it was part of my routine, when really it was just a place to sit without thinking too hard. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, and she was there, already at the counter, half turned toward the window, her hair tucked behind one ear in that careless way she did. "Hey," I said, and she glanced at me. Just a flicker of recognition, the kind that travels across your chest before it settles. The usual. She nodded. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately, arranging the cups and lids. I watched the way she wrapped the paper sleeve around my coffee. Small, careful gestures that suddenly felt significant. I said nothing, standing there with my hands shoved in my jacket pockets, pretending I wasn't watching. She smiled, almost to herself, and I realized it was because she remembered the one time I'd mixed up my order. 2 sugars, she asked, tilting her head. "Or one today?" "One's fine," I said, because I wanted to hear her say it again, hear her voice carry that quiet precision, the kind that made ordinary words feel like a little gift. I moved to the small table near the window, the one with a scuffed wooden top and a chair that leaned a little too far back. She followed, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, or maybe that was my wishful thinking. Either way, I let it happen. I unfolded my notebook without opening it, tracing the edges of the pages with my thumb. I had a habit of jotting down little thoughts I never sent to anyone, texts I never wrote, messages to people I couldn't quite reach. Mostly to her. Not that she'd ever know. She leaned over to refill the sugar container at the table. Our fingers brushed, brief, accidental, and yet it lingered longer than necessary. She didn't pull away immediately, which was enough to make my chest tighten. "You've got that new internship coming up, right?" she asked, not looking at me, as though she didn't want to make it obvious that she remembered. "Yeah," I said, my voice uneven. "Starts Monday." I traced the rim of my coffee cup with a finger, pretending to be absorbed in nothing. She nodded, biting the corner of her lip in that way I had noticed before, thoughtful, distracted. It was a tiny habit, but somehow it felt like she was letting me see a private corner of herself. A pause stretched between us, long enough for the ticking clock above the counter to feel loud. I wanted to say something else, but the words felt flimsy, like paper in a wind tunnel. Instead, I folded my napkin neatly, flicking my eyes toward her hands as she stirred her tea. I wondered if she noticed my hesitation. Maybe she did. Maybe she was used to it. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing slightly, and her expression changed. Something closed off, something colder than the warm, easy way she had smiled earlier. She looked up at me, eyes brief, measured. "I have to run," she said, her voice quieter than before, careful. "See you whenever." I nodded, unsure if she meant it or if she was already somewhere else in her mind. And just as I was packing my notebook, a text came through on my phone. "Can we talk?" "Later." I froze, thumb hovering over the screen. My coffee had gone cold, but somehow I didn't mind. I didn't expect her to text back so quickly. "Later today," it read. I hesitated, thumb hovering, feeling the familiar knot in my stomach. Part anticipation, part guilt. After all, she was my friend's mom. Mid-40s, maybe early 50s. Divorced. And yet here I was, imagining what later might mean. I met her at the little park across from the cafe. She was sitting on the worn wooden bench, scarf loosely draped around her neck, the early sunlight catching strands of silver in her hair. She smiled faintly when she saw me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes entirely, but it was enough. "You came," she said. Her voice carried a hint of surprise, like she wasn't sure if she'd meant to invite me at all. "I thought I'd check in," I said, trying to sound casual, which made me sound anything but. We sat together, and she handed me the thermos she had carried. "Coffee's still warm," she said. I took it, our fingers brushing for the briefest moment, and I felt the sharp twinge of something I wasn't supposed to feel. She laughed softly, almost to herself, and told me about a stray cat she had been feeding for the last month. "It waits for me every evening." "Stubborn little thing," she said. I nodded, imagining her crouched in the doorway, calling to a creature that refused to be tamed. I shared a small memory in return, a lazy Sunday when I had spent hours painting in my tiny apartment, listening to music too loud, thinking no one cared. It felt strange, exposing that corner of myself to her. But she listened genuinely. The quiet between us stretched comfortably, like a shared secret. Then, almost unconsciously, I leaned over to help her untangle the thermos lid, and our hands met again. She didn't pull away, only let her fingers linger a second longer than necessary. My pulse tightened. I thought about what was dangerous about this. My friend, the social gap, the whispers I imagined would trail us if anyone saw. And yet, part of me wanted to test it just a little. I imagined us in a rented cabin, the smell of coffee thick around us, talking until dark. I sometimes think, she said suddenly, looking down at her hands, that some moments feel too small to matter, but they stick anyway. Weird, huh? I watched her, seeing the quiet vulnerability behind her measured composure. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I said, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She glanced up then, eyes softening, and smiled the faintest, private smile. A breeze stirred the park leaves, and she flicked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Our shoulders brushed lightly as we shifted to leave, and she said, almost as an afterthought, "Careful with that thermos, or you'll make a mess." The words were mundane, but the touch, the glance, the pause before she spoke, it said more than either of us admitted aloud. I walked away with a warmth that wasn't just from the coffee, wondering if we both knew exactly what we were doing, or if we were only beginning to understand it. I didn't expect her to leave so abruptly. One minute we were sitting on the same park bench, shoulders brushing against the cold wood, and the next she stood, tugging her scarf tighter around her neck, glancing at her watch. "Sorry," she said almost hurriedly, "I have to pick something up." I nodded, but my hands lingered on the thermos, as if letting go meant more than it should. I wanted to ask her to stay, but the words wouldn't form. Not yet. The next day, I went back to the cafe. She was there, but her smile was different, measured, almost distant. She didn't look at me first. She was busy arranging the pastries, counting cups. I felt a pang I couldn't name. The warmth from yesterday had cooled into something fragile. "Hey," I said softly. She glanced up, eyes polite but brief. "Hey." I sat down across from her anyway. She poured my coffee with the same careful precision, but her hands trembled slightly, and she avoided my gaze. I wanted to reach across the table, touch the scar on her knuckle from earlier, or just anchor myself to her presence. But I didn't. A friend of mine walked by the window, waved. I froze. She tensed, eyes flicking toward the street, then back at me. The distance between us felt heavier, like a new weight pressing down, the kind you notice only when silence stretches too long. We talked, in fragments, about trivial things, the weather, a book she had recommended, but the air between us felt thick with everything we weren't saying. I noticed her lips twitch, a suppressed smile. I wondered if it was meant for me, or if she was remembering someone else entirely. She reached over to pick up a sugar packet I had dropped, and our fingers brushed. This time, she pulled away quickly, stiffly. My heart thudded. I understood then. She was pulling back, testing the line she wasn't ready to cross. I imagined the conversation if it happened differently. If I leaned in, if I asked her outright. If I let her see exactly what I wanted. I pictured her looking at me, hesitating, lips parting, a half smile that was almost confession. I shook my head. Dangerous. "Do you want cream?" I asked, voice too casual, trying to mask the tension. "No, thanks," she said, avoiding my eyes again. We sipped in silence. My fingers brushed my notebook again, tracing its edges as if it could anchor me to something safe. The cafe was quiet except for the occasional clink of cups and the low hum of the espresso machine. Every sound felt amplified, every pause between words a little sharp. Then she leaned slightly closer, as if to show me something written on the napkin, her shoulder grazing mine. It was accidental, but not entirely. My pulse spiked. I could feel the faint warmth of her arm against mine, and I realized we were dangerously close. For a moment, the world outside the cafe dissolved, the friend outside the window, the ticking clock, the polite distance, all of it faded. I caught her gaze, fleeting, charged. Her lips parted slightly. I leaned forward just enough to feel it might happen, might break the careful barrier between us. But then the bell over the door jingled, and she straightened, eyes down, careful again. And just like that, the moment slipped away. It was one of those evenings where the city seemed too bright, and yet I felt like I was walking in shadow. I had texted her, as usual, but she didn't reply. Not immediately. And when she did, it was brief, busy, maybe tomorrow. I wandered to the park bench where we had met before. The leaves had turned a muted gold, and the air smelled faintly of rain that hadn't quite come. She was already there, sitting stiffly, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, shoulders hunched like she was carrying something I couldn't touch. I sat a careful distance away. "Hey," I said, voice softer than I meant. She didn't answer right away. She tilted her head toward the horizon, as if waiting for something far away to distract her. Then, finally, I didn't think you'd come. Her voice sounded smaller than usual, fragile. I wasn't sure I should, I admitted. But I stopped, the words tangling in my throat. I wanted to tell her everything, that her absence made my chest ache, that I imagined her in ways I shouldn't. Instead, I let silence fill the space between us. She glanced at me then, eyes sharp for a second, almost startled. "I saw someone," she said slowly, not meeting my gaze. Her words hung awkwardly in the air. Jealousy tightened my stomach. I wanted to ask who what, but my voice faltered. Instead, I watched her hands, the way they gripped the cup, thumb tracing the rim, the faint tremor I had noticed before. I don't want to make things complicated," she said finally, voice low, careful. "But sometimes I feel like I can't, like I'll lose myself if I let it go further." I shifted closer, daring to close the small distance. "I don't want that either," I whispered. But my throat constricted. I couldn't say what I truly wanted. I only reached out, letting my fingers brush hers, careful, tentative. She flinched, then let her hand stay, though it didn't quite relax. Our eyes met. Long, hesitant, charged. She was holding back something, the confession hovering at her lips, like a storm waiting for permission to break. I imagined her lips, her voice, the warmth I wanted to lean into. But the world felt so precarious. My friend's house, the age gap, the boundaries we were teetering on. I wanted her to say yes, to admit she wanted it too, but part of me was terrified that the next word might shatter everything. She started, then paused, swallowing the words. Her breath hitched slightly, eyes darting away. I could almost feel the wall she had built, stone by stone, slowly letting me glimpse the person behind it. The park around us seemed impossibly quiet, as if it knew we were balancing on the edge of something we couldn't name yet. I wanted to ask the question, the one that might change everything. But instead, I just let my hand linger over hers, thumb brushing gently. And then she moved her cup slightly, the sound breaking the spell. She gave me a faint, apologetic smile and asked almost quietly, "Do you want to sit for a bit?" The words were simple, the pause between them, unbearable. I nodded, heart hammering. And that was it, the moment before the edge. The words unsaid, the confession unspoken, the question hanging in the air like a breath we both held. I hadn't seen her in a few days. I kept telling myself it was nothing. She was busy, life moved fast, maybe she just needed space. But every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, hoping it was her, hoping she wanted me, hoping she didn't. When I finally saw her again, it was at the cafe, early evening, the sunlight slanting across the tables. She was there, sipping tea alone, but her expression was guarded, a wall carefully erected between us. My chest tightened before I even reached her table. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. She looked up, eyes sharp for a fraction of a second, then softened, almost. "Hey." I noticed the ring on her left hand. Not new, not obvious at first glance, but there. A faint line of gold against her skin. My stomach sank. I realized I had assumed things too easily. Her distance, her hesitation, the pauses that had felt like longing. Maybe they weren't for me. I didn't know. I murmured, staring at the cup in front of her. She looked down at her tea, fingers tracing the rim. "It's complicated," she said finally. "I shouldn't have. I didn't want to mislead you. But it's not simple. Not anymore." I wanted to reach out, ask her to explain, to tell me she still wanted me, still felt it too. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I watched her, tracing the slight tremor of her hand, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She smiled faintly, apologetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered, almost to herself. I felt the hope I had been clinging to falter, replaced by a strange, unsteady pause. Part of me wanted to storm out, to demand clarity, to shake her until she admitted what she wanted. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed, swallowed, and let the silence stretch. She looked up suddenly. "There's someone else," she said. The words were soft, careful, and yet they struck me like a sudden gust of cold wind. My chest ached in a way I hadn't expected. I tried to imagine it differently. Maybe she was speaking figuratively, maybe she meant a friend, but no. The pause between her words was enough to make the truth settle. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. We sat there, sipping our drinks, the steam rising from the cups, the hum of the cafe around us. Nothing had changed in the room, but everything had changed for me. She stood to leave, her scarf falling loosely around her shoulders. I want to call her back, to ask her to stay, to insist on what we both couldn't admit. But the words wouldn't form. "See you," I started. "Later," she said, vague, non-committal, and with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She walked away, leaving the seat across from me empty. My hands hovered over the table for a moment, then fell. I didn't text her, didn't follow her, didn't knock on the door that waited just around the corner. The chair stayed empty. The cup cooled. The moment paused, suspended, unresolved. I found her in the kitchen of her small apartment. She was leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, rinsing a mug onto the tap. The sunlight through the window caught her hair in gold strands, the familiar curve of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. I wanted to turn and leave, to let her keep her space, to let her life continue without me intruding, but I couldn't. "I came," I said, voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the fridge. She didn't look up. Her hands paused, water dripping onto the sink. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I said. My fingers itched to reach for hers, to bridge the gap, but I stayed just a step back. The choice was mine, speak or walk away. She set the mug down, leaning on her elbows. "I shouldn't have let you get close," she said, words careful, quiet. "It's not fair. She stopped, paused, looked at me, finally meeting my eyes. "Young, and you're entangled in things I can't untangle." I felt that familiar pull in my chest, the tension between wanting her and knowing what we risked. "I don't care," I said simply, though my voice trembled. I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." She swallowed. The pause stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. Then, finally, she let a small sigh escape. She stepped closer, just enough that our shoulders brushed. I could feel the heat of her body, the faint scent of her perfume, the careful rhythm of her breathing. I'm scared," she whispered. And in that one sentence, she gave me more than she had in all the days before. Fear, restraint, longing, all tangled together. I reached out slowly, fingertips grazing her hand. She didn't pull away, but neither did she hold on. Just a touch. Enough. Fragile, hesitant, real. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I don't want to walk away." She blinked, lips parting slightly, like she might speak and retract, like she might deny herself, deny me. I waited. The silence stretched, thick and intimate. Then she exhaled, soft and measured, and allowed her hand to rest over mine for a fraction longer than necessary. No words, no promises, just acknowledgement. "Okay," she said finally, small, human, ordinary. And it was enough. I felt something shift, the tension easing just a hair, not resolved, not perfect, but real. A quiet acceptance that we had crossed an invisible line, yet hadn't broken the world. We stood there for a moment, hands touching lightly, neither rushing, both aware of what it meant, both aware of what it might cost. The sunlight fell across the counter, the sound of running water filled the space, and for the first time in days, I felt steady. Not safe, not certain, but present. She looked at me just once, and I saw it. A hint of relief, a flicker of warmth, a small opening that hadn't been there before. And that was enough. A touch, a glance, a quiet okay, to hold the weight of everything we had both carried silently. Weeks passed, and the cafe became our quiet orbit again. I'd arrive at 8:47 a.m., black coffee in hand, and she would be there, setting out cups and spoons with that careful precision I'd come to recognize. We didn't speak of the weeks we'd spent apart, or the uncertainty that had hovered like fog. We didn't need to. Some mornings, we shared the small bench in the park, the one with the scuffed wood and tilted legs. The stray cat she'd been feeding was still there, waiting, its patience echoing our own. We watched it together sometimes, neither of us saying much, letting the silence do the work words couldn't. She laughed at my awkward jokes now, the ones I had once worried would sound childish. And I noticed the tiny things she did, tucking her scarf just so, tracing the rim of her cup absent-mindedly, flicking her eyes toward my hands, and I smiled inside, recognizing her small signals of comfort, of trust. We didn't announce anything, didn't need to. The intimacy was in the routine, the quiet shared tea, the gentle teasing over sugar, the way she'd hand me the thermos just so I wouldn't burn my fingers. Every little habit felt like a secret language, one we had built together, step by careful step. One afternoon, I offered to help carry groceries from her car. She laughed softly at my careful balancing act, shaking her head at how seriously I treated a bag of apples. I brushed a stray leaf from her shoulder, and she let it stay, our fingers lingering a moment longer than strictly necessary. Even when life intruded, friends stopping by, errands to run, the occasional rainstorm delaying our walks, we found our quiet corners. There was no grand confession, no dramatic gesture, just the gentle knowledge that we had found each other again, cautiously, deliberately. I remember the first text she sent. Can we talk? Later. And how it had made my chest both ache and swell. Now, that ache had softened into something steadier. I didn't need fireworks or proclamations. Just this. The warmth of her hand brushing mine as we reached for the same cup, the soft murmur of her voice over the coffee machine's hum. On a Wednesday morning, I arrived at the park bench a little early. She was already there, thermos in hand, sunlight spilling across the wooden slats. I sat beside her, our shoulders brushing, and she smiled that private, knowing smile. No words were needed. I sipped my coffee, black, just the way I liked it, and she stirred hers slowly, humming quietly to herself. The breeze carried the faint scent of rain. The leaves rustled above us, and I felt the calm of being seen, of being understood, of being home. Not perfect, but undeniably ours. As we sat together, the stray cat weaving between our feet, I realized something simple, quiet, and irreplaceable. Some things didn't need saying. Some things were already understood. And in that small, ordinary moment, I smiled. She smiled back. That was enough.